have our meeting in June. We have one matter remaining on the calendar for today, and that is Lake Arrowhead Community Services District, case number 6142-1, which was noticed for a short variance today. And who is here representing Lake Arrowhead Community Services District today?
Tony Carrickaborough.
Thank you. And can you just restate your name, spell it for the record, and just state who you are and what your position is?
Tony Carrickaborough, that's C-A-R-R-I-C-A-B-U-R-U, and I am the Mechanical Maintenance Supervisor for Lake Arrowhead Community Services District.
Thank you, Mr. Carrickaborough. And who is representing the Executive Officer this morning?
Teresa Barrera on behalf of the Executive Officer.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to try to get your name correct. Carrickaborough?
That's good.
Okay. Tried to spell it out. You have not been before us before, have you?
No, I have not.
Okay. I'm sorry? Oh, did you watch the video by any chance?
I did.
Oh, you did watch the video. So then you are somewhat familiar with how this proceeding will go.
Somewhat, yes.
Okay. So given that you are here alone, I take it? Mm-hmm. And so you will be serving both to represent Lake Arrowhead and also to serve as the only witness for today. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So if you will need assistance, we're happy to give you that assistance in terms of procedure and helping by asking the questions that you may not cover in your testimony. But what we'll do is I'll swear you in and any other witnesses who may testify today. We'll allow you to give just a brief statement, opening statement, which will accept this testimony, but just a brief opening statement as to your position and why you're here today and what you're asking for. Okay. And Ms. Barrera will give a quick opening statement, a brief opening statement as to the position of the district with regard to your request for the short variance today. And then we'll come back to you for a more full discussion. And of course, Ms. Barrera may have questions and the board members may have questions as well. And then I don't know if Ms. Barrera will have any witnesses today, but if she does, she will present them at that time and then we'll deliberate. Okay. I'm going to let you start with the opening, and then I've read the petition, though, and I know you've asked for a short, but you're going to need a regular variance to last through the year. And so if you can start with an opening statement. Well, actually, let me swear you in first, because your opening statement will be testimony. So anybody who wishes to testify or who may testify in today's hearing, please rise to be sworn in at this time. Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you. So you may begin with your opening statement.
Okay. My name is Tony Carrickaborough. I am the Mechanical Maintenance Supervisor for Lake Arrowhead Community Services District. We are the water and wastewater public agency that provides service to residential and commercial customers in Lake Arrowhead and some of the surrounding towns. We have 21 wastewater lift stations, 24 reservoir and pump stations, 2 wastewater treatment plants, 2 water treatment plants, with 35 generators total. I am here to ask for a short variance for one of our wastewater lift stations that has exceeded the 200-hour limit.
Thank you, Mr. Carrickaborough. Ms. Barrera, your opening.
Yeah, the district does not anticipate opposing this variance. I think the issue that will be presented has to do with the element of whether compliance was beyond the facility's reasonable control or due to conditions beyond their reasonable control. In particular, the hearing board typically wants facilities, we know, to move promptly for relief, and this facility exceeded the hourly limit in February of this year and did not move quickly for relief, but I don't. This Health and Safety Code also requires the hearing board to take into account whether the facility is a public facility providing an essential public service. And here, essential public service, or the Health and Safety Code defines essential public service as including a sewage treatment works or water delivery operations. And the facility states in paragraph 5 of their petition that without use of this emergency generator, there's a risk of a sewage spill into Lake Arrowhead. And I think that that's going to be very, very significant in the board's decision today and certainly for the district. And again, we do not anticipate opposing this variance.
Thank you. Just a couple of things, Mr. Kirkeborough, before I turn it back over to you, and then you can provide the board with a fuller explanation and more testimony. Number one, I know you applied for a short variance. There's different notice that's given to the public for a short variance, and as you know, you're going to require a regular variance. So it's quite unorthodox, and in some ways, it's almost like giving a second bite at emergency relief. But there has been notice. We'll have to, I should ask you right now, you are planning, or are you planning to request a regular variance to cover through the end of the year?
Yeah.
Okay. And so at this time, would you, not at this time, but during this hearing today, we should put that on calendar. And so are you requesting to have notice circulated to the public with regard to a regular variance hearing?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so we'll make sure we get that taken care of today as well. And then the second thing is, Ms. Barrera noted that we, as a board, are concerned sometimes with how quickly a petitioner comes before us to try and get relief, and that is true. But also, one of the findings, we have 6 findings to make today. I should ask, I know you indicated you watched the video. Are you familiar with the 6 findings we need to make?
Yeah, I put together each of the 6 findings.
Okay, and I would think that the one, we need to cover them all with evidence. However, the one that I think you should cover for us, if you can, a little more lengthy, is the beyond reasonable control finding. And in particular, I noticed that in your, both in the summary of events, which, by the way, we should mark, I'll do that in a moment, and also in your petition, you mentioned the word chose to run the generator. So if you could more explain the circumstances that might inform that choice, that would be very helpful for the board. Sure. Because while it is true that we do consider an essential public service, we do need a little bit more than that. So I'm going to let you do that in a moment, but I just said I will mark. Let me mark for, we received, I believe, 4. Is this one that we received? Oh, okay. Okay, let's mark some of these. You have provided the board with several documents. The first was a summary of events, and we'll mark that as Exhibit 1. Oh, you have Exhibit 1. Well, we'll change that to Exhibit 2. You've given us a 2-page document entitled California Nevada River Forecast Center with a map, and it's 2-page. Oh, okay.
I marked the ones that I had referenced in my summary of events. I thought the others might just be useful if it came up.
Okay, you're right, I didn't realize that. Okay, so I'm sorry. Let's start over. The California Nevada River Forecast Center, that 2-page document, as indicated, will remain Exhibit 1. A photograph with lift station 12 and a wet well marked on it will remain as Exhibit 2. What looks like the log, the operating log for the generator will be Exhibit 3, as is marked. And I think those are the only ones you marked. Okay, am I right? Yeah, the other ones aren't marked, so I will mark them. The summary, which I don't know what I just did with it. Oh, here it is. The summary of events then will be Exhibit 4. And then we have 2 letters, one dated February 22nd, 2019, from the Lake Arrowhead Community Services District to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and that will be Exhibit 5. And then a second letter from the same to the same, dated February 28th, 2019, and that will be Exhibit number 6. And with that, Mr. Kirkaborough, you may present any additional testimony you wish at this time. And you may reference any of those exhibits as you wish, now that they are marked.
Okay. I would like to read the summary of events. First, I'd like to start with the facility information. The lift station 12 is a wastewater lift station that average sewer flows of 200 to 300 gallons per minute, but can see much more during storm events. The wet well for this station is located less than 40 feet away from Lake Arrowhead, our potable drinking water reservoir, and that refers to Exhibit 2, showing the distance. On February 14, 2019, Lift Station 12 experienced power interruptions from Edison that resulted in a circuit board within our automatic transfer switch to fail. Without having the ability to transfer to emergency generator power, I chose to run the wastewater lift station on generator power until a replacement part was received. A replacement circuit board was located and purchased that afternoon, with next day expedited shipping paid. A shipping error was made by the supplier accidentally shipping the circuit board via ground shipping. The supplier tried to correct the shipping error but was unsuccessful. We tried locating another circuit board, but that was the last one available in the U.S. On February 22nd, 2019, generator engine hours reached the 200-hour limit. Referred to Exhibit 3 as the engine log. I just did a simple calculation from the last recorded engine hours, and then from that event, 24 hours, because we ran it around the clock until this date, which had exceeded the 200-hour limit. Getting our portable generator on site was not possible due to 12 inches of snow and a steep, narrow driveway getting to this station. On March 1st, 2019, we received the circuit board. It was installed that day and the generator was turned off. On March 19th, 2019, more power interruptions resulted in another ATS failure in which the transfer switch would again no longer transfer between Edison power and generator. I decided to replace the ATS with a new unit rather than replace parts. We placed an order for a new ATS on 3/20/2019 with expedited shipping. On March 22nd, 2019, we received the new ATS. It was installed that afternoon and the diesel generator was turned off. On April 14th, 2019, I emailed the clerk of the board regarding filing for a variance. I wasn't familiar with this process. I've never done it. I had read the permit shortly before April 14th, which made me aware of this 200-hour limit. And then not knowing what to do next, I emailed the clerk of the board, and from there there was a number of correspondence before filing this short variance. On May 3rd, 2019, I filed for a short variance. The delay from April 14th to May 3rd was due to obtaining a check for our filing fee. Our check runs every 2 weeks, and I was simply just waiting for that in order to send all the documents and the fee. On page 2 of that same Exhibit 4 is just some of the other events that we were dealing with at that time. I don't know if you would like me to go over each one of these. I thought it might be useful to kind of help understand. There was a number of other issues that we were contending with at the same time, and I thought it might be useful if needed.
It's up to you if you want to go through them.
Okay. On February 14th, 2019, that same day, we had 2 other lift stations that experienced VFD-related issues, one of which resulted in a 20,000-gallon spill. I didn't reference that, but that is Exhibit, sorry, let me get that.
I'm sorry, is VFD,
A variable frequency drive.
okay, thank you.
The power interruption wouldn't let it reset itself, and so the pump wouldn't turn back on. And because of the heavy flows that we were experiencing, 2 pumps were not able to keep up with the inflow we were getting. So Exhibit 5 is a letter, and it from our operations manager to California Regional Water Quality Control Board, outlining the spill and the amount and what took place. The next was the same date, and that went on till February 17th, 2019. We had another controlled discharge of 2.7 million gallons at our wastewater treatment plant. That again was being inundated with more flow than we were able to handle and send down to our outfall. And that is referenced as Exhibit 6 to the California Regional Water Quality Control Board. February 22nd through March 18th, our district admin facility elevator motor control board had fried again from more interruptions from Edison Power. This is something that just took a while to be replaced. We had another incident on March 5th, 2019. Our admin facility was leaking in tenant's office. All of these events fall under my department's responsibility. And so we were tending to these as well as more. These are just a little larger events than some of the other ones that were taking place. On March 12th through March 13th of 2019, our 900 megahertz SCADA radio network was experiencing some failures that we had to attend to immediately. Again, these are just more events that were keeping us from other things. So March 18th, 2019 to April 8th, lift station 8 experienced a generator failure resulting in internal engine damage. Another example of something we were attending to almost on a daily basis. We were obtaining parts, trying to fix the problem in-house. We had another company come out and diagnose that the engine was beyond repair. And then lastly, April 4th to April 10th, 2019 was a sludge pump failure at the wastewater treatment plant. Again, another example of something we were attending to. And I'm not using these as an excuse because, to be entirely honest, I wasn't familiar with the variance process, what I needed to do, how fast I needed to act. And so this is simply kind of showing what are the things were keeping me from being able to research and understand the permit and the variances. And that's everything I have for my summary of events.
Thank you. Do you want to turn it over to questions from Ms. Barrera?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Barrera, do you have questions?
Yes, Mr. Kirkaburu. Permit, can you identify the permit condition that sets the 200-hour limit?
I believe that is Rule 1110.2.
Okay, actually, I'm looking at the permit that is attached to your petition that you filed.
Okay.
And is it condition 3 of that
Oh,
permit?
yes, I'm sorry, yes.
That sets the 200-hour limit? Okay. And that's the permit condition that you're currently in violation of?
That is correct.
Okay. And are you familiar with our district rules?
No, but I'm getting more familiar with.
Okay. So District Rule 203B requires a facility to comply with all of the conditions of their permit. So would you agree that you need relief, variance relief from District Rule 203B because that's what requires you to comply with condition number 3?
Yes.
Okay. And in your summary of events, you state that you chose to operate on February 14th, that you chose to run the wastewater lift station on generator power until a replacement part was received. Can you explain a little bit more about that, why you made that decision?
Yes, I simply could not rely on Edison Power, and we were experiencing some heavy flow during those storm events. And so the wet well, it's fairly small, and like I was saying, it was less than 40 feet away from the lake. And if we were to experience a power outage, by the time we got the alarm and were able to respond and try to remedy the situation, there would already be a spill. So I chose to rely on my generator as the sole power provider and Edison as the backup.
Okay. And had you not made that decision, what would have been the consequences of relying primarily on the Edison power?
It would have likely caused a spill into our drinking reservoir.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is we experienced a number of other power interruptions in that same area.
Okay. And on page 2 of your summary of events, in terms of, these were other, that the page 2 mentions some other discharges that occurred. Did those affect the drinking water?
No, those went down
Okay. So,
to this area.
so would you say that a failure for the, that resulted in a discharge into Lake Arrowhead was a more serious consequence than those other discharges?
Absolutely.
Okay. How many employees does Lake Arrowhead Community Services District have?
I think we have roughly 56.
And with respect to this particular engine, are there any other options available to the district in terms of what it can do if there's a failure of of Edison, of the grid power? Could you get, for example, another emergency engine in there? Is there space for it?
There is. In fact, we've used it before, but this was a kind of a unique circumstance in that it happened in the winter, and we had around 10 to 12 inches of snow on that driveway. It's kind of hard to show in this picture because it's already down towards the wet well, but the driveway coming up is actually an easement on a person's property and is extremely steep and narrow. And so we do have a portable generator. It's mounted on the back of a truck, but it would have been very difficult to get it down there during this time.
Okay. And how long was there an accessibility issue to this engine?
I'm sorry, I don't.
You're saying that at that time you weren't, because there was so much snow on the ground that you wouldn't have been able to get another engine down to where this engine was located. And I'm just wondering, how long was that? So the snow created an accessibility issue to the existing engine. How long did that situation last?
I would say it lasted till March 1st. That's why I guess I didn't reference, I know I did reference that on my summary, but we didn't really talk about it much. But I used the NOAA website to show how much snow was on the ground during that event when it took place. That's Exhibit 1. The first page shows 10 to 14 inches, which is accurate. That's about what we had. And then on February 28th, on page 2, it shows we still had 5 to 8 inches of snow on the ground. And that at that time, we pretty much, we had everything remedied by then, because March 1st, let me see. Yes, March 1st, we were able to remedy the problem with the automatic transfer switch.
Okay. So exactly what did you do on March 1st?
March 1st, we received the circuit board, and that was installed in the automatic transfer switch, and the generator was turned off.
Okay. And then what did you do on March 19th?
March 19th was another power interruption, and we realized that the automatic transfer switch was compromised in other ways, and so at that point, we again had to run it on the generator rather than rely on Edison power.
Okay. And you ended up replacing the unit completely? As opposed to just the circuit board?
Yeah, I didn't want to risk taking any more chances. It had already proven had two circumstances that were causing us to nearly spill into our lake, and so I decided to remove it and replace it with a new unit.
Okay. And prior to February and March of this year, had you had any prior problems with that automatic transfer switch?
No.
Okay.
But we have had other experiences with some transfer switches as a result of Edison
Okay.
interruptions.
In 2018, do you know how many hours you had to use this emergency generator?
I did. According to our log, we used 18 hours total on that generator. And I think, majority of that was just maintenance. We do roughly 20 minutes of maintenance monthly.
Okay. And in 2017, how many hours did you need to use that emergency generator?
It was used 12 hours.
Okay. And again, were those hours then mostly for maintenance?
I believe so. If I did the calculation, it's about 20 minutes per month, and then the rest was due to Edison interruptions.
Okay. And I have no further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Bird, you have questions?
You mentioned that there are 56 employees. There are not 56 maintenance employees. That's
No,
56
that is
total.
Yes, correct.
And so that includes about how many maintenance employees, other than including yourself?
Well, in my department, there's 4 other employees beside myself, and we're responsible for all of the listed reservoirs and lift stations. As far as maintenance and keeping everything operational, we have like water treatment plant operators and wastewater treatment plant operators, but their operators are not mechanics or electricians. So we have 2 electricians and 2 mechanics and myself.
Okay, so for practical purposes and keeping things running, there's only 5 employees. How did you find out about filing a variance?
Well, I actually went on the website because I read the permit. It didn't really indicate much in regards to what steps need to be taken. So I went on the website and I began reading and researching on AQMD's website. And then at that point, I think I worked my way to the clerk of the board and I found an email address and was able to ask a question. I don't know if I included it, but I brought it with me today. I didn't bring an attachment for each one of you. But I did bring it, and just in case it was needed, but on the April 14th is when I first asked some of the questions of what and how I needed to proceed.
And all based on just following the website, huh?
Yeah, and that took a bit of reading to
Yeah.
navigate to where I needed to go, but yeah.
Okay. Would you say then for the other events that they're primarily due on Exhibit 4 on the back, the other events primarily due to failures of Edison? Is that what I was hearing?
No, I would
No.
say the first bullet point where the VFD-related issues was a direct result of the Edison interruptions. The second bullet point, referencing the 2.7 million gallons of controlled discharge spill, was simply because the water and the amount of flow coming into our wastewater treatment plant was far exceeded what we were able to handle. And so at some point we realized we weren't able to keep up.
And that was based on the weather,
Yes.
the volume of rain? or
Snowpack
snow?
and the tremendous amount of rainfall. And then the other bullet points on that list are all
Just-
directly related to the Edison interruptions.
Oh, okay, so there's only.
I'm sorry, I take that back. The last one, Lift Station 8 generator failure, wasn't. That was just something wrong with the generator itself that resulted in internal damage.
Okay, so the other events taking place were either, except for that one at Lift Station 8, were either Edison-related or volume of water based on snowpack?
Correct.
Okay. That's all, thank you.
Can you just describe briefly what's the purpose of the lift that the generator powers?
The lift station?
Yes.
The lift station is for wastewater, both residential and commercial, and it lifts the water. We have a number of lift stations around the lake. It simply lifts the water, that station in particular, roughly about 30 feet, and then it again gravities to another one of our lift stations, which brings it up again, and we work our way around the lake in order to get it to the treatment plant.
So if it's not working, it just will end up overflowing as opposed to lifting the water and just moving it to where it needs to go next.
Correct. The Exhibit 2, it's hard to see, but the arrow is pointing at the wet well, and the wet well would simply be the relief point. If there was no lift occurring, the water would leave that wet well right there and go right into the lake.
Okay. And this lift station, is it normally manned by anyone, or it runs by itself?
It runs by itself, but we have SCADA that we are monitoring and watching it. It has alarms that notify us of events.
But the testimony that you gave was when an alarm goes off, if it's not automatically going to generator, it might be too late and cause a spill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
There's not a whole lot of time to get there.
Okay. You mentioned the portable generator. Is that not a diesel generator? Is it a cleaner generator or a newer generator?
No, it's a diesel generator mounted on the back of a truck.
So, do you know, does it have the same emissions as the one that is currently there?
It does.
Okay. Do you know the emissions profile of the generator that you have, so that we know what emissions there are when it runs over the 200 hours?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Okay. Let's see if we can get it some other way. Those are my questions. Anyone else? Mr. Balagopalan?
Mr. Carey-Cabral, if the ATS, the automatic transfer switch had not failed, then when Edison power was cut off, then the emergency generator would have kicked up immediately?
Yes, that is
Is
correct.
that what happened? So, so then you had to go and, since it didn't start, then somebody went there and manually started it, is that?
That is correct. We received a high wet well alarm, which was the first notification that there was an issue. And that is when I responded along with one of the operators that was on call that evening, and we arrived to try to remedy the situation, and which resulted in me manually putting the automatic transfer switch in generator position because it wouldn't transfer on its own.
So that's what you meant by the the sentence, without having the ability to transfer to that you chose to run it. So it didn't transfer automatically, you manually moved it to run it, basically.
Yes, correct. And then we tried to see if it would transfer on its own several times, and it would not. So that's when we decided we needed to find a circuit board. And well, we looked further into it and discovered that the circuit board was fried, and then we started looking for one to purchase.
So if the circuit board didn't get rerouted in the mail and it got there in a timely manner, you would have been able to install it and get the generator, ATS system working properly?
That is correct. We had paid for next day shipping, so it would have been remedied.
Do you know how many hours you had at that on February 14th?
I show 515 hours.
That's cumulative, so.
And that was for, let me see, for the year.
Because I think your statement said on February 22nd you exceeded 200. So I'm assuming on 14th it was close, but not close to 200.
515 was the beginning of the year engine hours. And so I calculated 24 hours each day after that to get February 22nd is when we exceeded the limit. So 8
So
days.
if you had got the circuit board in a timely manner and you got it then you would not have exceeded at that point
Correct.
the 200. But subsequently, you had another failure on the March 19th.
That is correct. That one, fortunately, we were able to get the automatic transfer switch at a timely manner and get it installed, which only resulted in,
So you didn't
2
look at
days.
the circuit board, but the whole switch you replaced.
yes.
And how much does that cost? Did
It
cost?
was about 3,500, and I think we paid about 800 of that was shipping to have it sent from Texas.
Okay. And then with that, that is now resolved that issue of
has.
the switchover. Yeah.
And we've tested it a number of times since then, and it's working properly.
Do you have backup units available now, or is it, since the circuit board is only the last one in the country?
I did purchase another automatic transfer switch to essentially have on the shelf because it was so difficult to locate some of these parts, and I didn't want to be in this position again. I felt it was beneficial to have one on hand that we could utilize at other stations if need be.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Senator?
Given that you had a failure, you tried to do some blending of the discharge. Could you describe how that was done and to what extent?
You're referring to Exhibit
6,
6? Let me see.
third paragraph.
I'm sorry, which paragraph?
Third
Third paragraph?
says blending discharge.
Okay, so we, at our wastewater treatment plant, we have a recycled water PAL system that has filters and UV, and we treat this water before we send it down our outfall. And so a large portion of this water was being treated prior to discharge. So we were cleaning it to the best of our ability.
The wastewater, what you're talking about.
Wastewater, yes,
It's being treated.
yes.
May I ask you, though, is this letter or this issue related to the use of the generator at the lift station?
It is not, it's just an example of some other, something else we were contending with at this.
So we might, it's not that relevant. We might
Well,
want
to
to
me, I'd like to ask the question.
You may, however, just be aware, this is
I'm aware.
related to a wholly different issue, and I
I
think,
know, but it's been presented as an exhibit, so I'm asking questions about it.
Okay.
I think it's appropriate. In the sampling, we had to prove that there was a really need, an urgency to address this issue today without giving notice to the public.
first of all, notice has been given to the public. This is a short variance. Second of all,
There is notice, okay. fine.
and second of all, this is not an issue of discharge. I think that Mr. Kirkeborough is trying to be overly conservative in what he's presenting to us, but this has nothing to do with the use of the generator. This is just to show that they were very busy in that time.
Madam Chair, may I ask my questions, please?
Yes, you may. However, I just want you to take into
I'm not out
account,
of order.
if it does not have to do with the 6 findings for the generator use, we should probably not touch it.
Well, but I am asking questions. You can decide the relevance of my question relates to the problems that have been presented to us. And you take samples of this
Yes, sir.
sampling process as well,
That is correct,
up and downstream.
yes.
Okay, fine. Now, on the circuit breakers, is there only one was in the country at the time?
That's what I was told by 3 of our vendors, that we'd reached out to try and obtain this particular unit.
A circuit breaker has a number of different parts in it. Are you aware of the part that failed you? Or did anybody tell you what part in the circuit breaker that failed?
Off of memory, I believe it was like a diode,
Diode?
and oftentimes we've replaced those. In fact, my electrician has replaced one of those at one of our other generators that had a similar issue, and he was able to replace just that diode because we weren't able to get a replacement circuit board fast enough.
Did it become operational when they placed the diode?
It did.
Well,
This was a little different. We weren't able to even identify it because it in such bad condition.
I worked on circuit boards before, so I'm telling you, I'm asking you now, therefore, when you test a circuit board, which is with probes, it's easy to determine what part of the circuit board that failed, correct?
Oh, yeah, it was very evident of what part was failed.
Right, and so you only have one diode in hand that you need to correct?
Yeah, assuming that it was a diode, I don't believe we could even identify exactly what it was. It was in such bad condition. And it caused other damage to the circuit board.
So the whole circuit board was zapped, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it was fairly compromised as a result of this.
And this is the only one that was in the country at the time.
That's what I was told. After discovering that we had a shipping error, we did everything in our power to try and locate another one, and that's when I was told that this is the only one in the country.
What company outside of the country, outside of the U.S., that made these circuit boards?
I'm not familiar with what country.
Are you familiar with the fact that the most advanced circuit board design is made here in the United States for all the aerospace industries?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Well, what's done is done. But however, the circuit boards are done here also. You might want to get ready for that.
Any other questions for Mr. Kirkeborough? Okay. Ms. Barrera, well, first of all, let me mark, we received from the district, they were regular variance conditions, but we would change them to short variance conditions. And we'll make a similar change later on. But let's mark it as Exhibit A. But actually, before I move to Ms. Barrera, let me ask Mr. Kirkeborough, have you seen these proposed variance conditions?
I have. I reviewed them yesterday.
And you agree with them?
I do.
Okay. With the exception that I think the excess emissions fees would have to be due sooner because it would be a short variance, so it can only last for 90 days
Okay.
or less. Ms. Barrera, the thing obviously we do not have is the excess emissions. Do you have anyone who might be able to give us some information on that?
I do.
Great.
Okay. The district calls Sean Benage. Will you turn it on? Will you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Sean Benage. First name is spelled S-H-A-W-N. My last name is spelled B-E-N-N-A-G-E. I'm a supervising air quality inspector.
Mr. Benage, I had asked you to look at excess emissions with respect to this engine, is that correct?
Yes, you did.
Okay, and can you tell us what the excess emissions are for this engine on an hourly basis?
For carbon monoxide, the emission factor is 0.41 pounds per hour. For NOx, the emission factor is 0.44 pounds per hour. For VOC, the emission factor is 0.39 pounds per hour. The PM10 emission factor is 0.02 pounds per hour. Those emission factors are based on the engine application from the engineer that reviewed and issued the permit to the facility. The SOx emissions factor is 0.001, and that emission was based on the 15 ppmv for California diesel.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Mr. Kirkeborough, do you have any questions on that?
No, but I would like to correct my statement. I did receive that from Sean. He forwarded it to me. I did a calculation with the NOx, but I didn't have each one of the ones he listed.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions on that? Mr. Balagopalan?
Mr. Bennett, when you said emission factor, you mean that's the emission rate that you cited, those numbers?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry, I missed the first two. It was .41 and .44. What were those?
CO was .41,
Okay, and
NOx was .44.
Thank you. Any other questions? None. Okay, any other witnesses that you wish to present?
No.
Okay. I'm going to ask if there's any member of the public who wishes to be heard on this matter, and I see none. Mr. Kirkeborough, would you like to give a brief closing statement?
I'm sorry, I didn't prepare a closing statement.
It's up to you if you want to give one. You don't have to.
I guess I would just like you all to understand that I did everything in my power. I apologize for not acting quickly enough on submitting a variance. I assure you, if this ever happens again, I will, now that I'm familiar with the situation. I am fairly new to my position. I've only been in this position for not quite 2 years. I've been with the district for 14, but I was, in all honesty, I wasn't familiar with how this all took place, and so I guess now I do.
Thank you. Ms. Barrera, your closing.
Yeah, the district does not oppose the issuance of the variance, and I believe that this board can make the required findings. The facility is in violation of District Rule 203B with respect to permit condition number 3. With respect to the beyond reasonable control element, I think that although there was some delay in seeking variance relief, other circumstances do not dictate that delay alone should mandate, not finding beyond reasonable control. It's a very small facility with a limited number of employees. It was dealing with weather-related conditions and Edison power outages. The equipment itself is critical, and the automatic transfer switch was not working, although the witness stated that he chose to put the generator into the running mode as opposed to leaving it on a switching mode. That seems, it really doesn't seem like there was any other choice to be made given the circumstances and the proximity of this engine to the lake, and what would happen if it did not switch on, and how that would result in a sewage spill into the lake, which was their drinking water. Under these circumstances, again, I think that you can make the findings.
Thank you. Anyone like to begin discussion? Ms. Byrd?
I just wanted to say thanks to Ms. Barrera for just making all the findings. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with what you stated, as well as this is an essential public service, and there is some consideration given because it's an essential public service. I'd like to say that I commend you for navigating the website, which is not an easy website to navigate, actually. At least I don't think so, but and reaching that point where you knew that you had to have a variance. I also wanted to say that you as an individual are not who we hold responsible for not getting this done. It is the district that you work for that should be aware of what needs to be done. So I hear you when you say that you didn't know and that you feel bad, but it's not you individually that's being held responsible. So just going back through, I hate to repeat what Ms. Barrera just said, but I know that we can make the findings. Facility is in violation. They've already exceeded their 200 hours for the year that have been allotted to run this generator based on condition 3 of their permit and Rule 203B, which requires them to operate accordingly with their permit. I believe it's beyond their reasonable control, as was stated in the testimony. There were a number of events that were happening at the same time, and there were a few people who were responsible for the maintenance of those events. I think that it would be unreasonable to expect, or that this would be arbitrary or unreasonable closing or taking if we were to say, no, you cannot have this because this facility needs to operate and they need to be prepared in the event of an emergency to assure that the community that they serve does not get sewage into the lake. So I believe that closing or takings without a corresponding benefit, the last 2 years, 2017 and 2018, had limited operation and they did not exceed their permit conditions. So we don't expect that they would have a problem once they get everything repaired, and at this point, everything has been repaired. Number 4 says applicant has given consideration of curtailing. There would be no curtailing. The engine must be able to be exercised to make sure it's ready to go, as well as available in the event of an emergency, because that's the whole purpose of having the engine. And so during the period the variance is in effect, will minimize the emissions based on the conditions, which I'm trying to find, that only allow for operation, for maintenance, and for, here we go. Oh, no, that's not it. It's Exhibit A, and I have it here somewhere. That only allow for the use of this engine for maintenance and for emergency. So that would limit or reduce as much as possible what might be used. And then the conditions also allow for, while the variance is in effect, that there will be, let me see here, because I can't find it. Thank you. That there will be a log of the operation, maintenance, and otherwise that takes place during the period of the variance. And so for all those reasons, I do think we can find good cause.
I agree. I did have some issues coming in just from reading the petition with regard to beyond reasonable control. I have no issues on that anymore. I just wanted to add to everything that was said. I agree wholeheartedly with Ms. Barrera that even though it said in the petition that you chose to run directly to the generator, it really wasn't a choice. There is no one staffing that remote lift station. The testimony was that with the alarms, it would be too late to respond. The expedited shipping was paid for. The mistake was not made by Lake Arrowhead. It was made by the shipper, which caused the initial problem in having to go over the hours. And that was shown by when I forget what it is called, an
ATS.
ATS, thank you. When the ATS was ordered, that was paid for by expedited shipping too, and that actually did come the next day, and it was put in place, and an extra one is now on hand should this happen again. So, under no circumstances do I find this to be not beyond reasonable control. It is beyond reasonable control, and I don't even think we have to call upon the essential public service exception, but I think we'll apply it just because it is an essential public service. Anyone else have any thoughts to add to?
No, I agree, we can make the findings. I think what triggered was the power failure at Edison side that needed for the generator to operate, but I'm assuming without the automatic transfer switch, you couldn't switch back when the power was back on, when Edison power was restored. So the engine had to run until they could repair the ATS unit, and it looks like they got the circuit board, but again, they didn't get it in a timely manner. Had they got it on February 15th or 16th, and they could have then restored, stopped running the generator, but due to the failure of getting the part, they couldn't stop it right then. So on February 22nd is when they exceeded the 200 hours, and then the subsequent failure on the March 19, almost a month later, again caused the generator to run, but at that point it was beyond the 200 hours anyway. So again, they took the right appropriate steps, expedited, as you mentioned, you all mentioned, and replaced the ATS unit, and that they have a backup unit, so in the future, if it happens, they can very quickly repair that and get the power back on, or back on the Edison side instead of running the generator. So I think, and again, we heard about the snow conditions, so they couldn't bring up the portable unit up to run it, so it won't exceed the 200 hours. So, and I think he provided in Exhibit 1, the snow conditions and the snow, and even though we don't see the slope of the road, it probably was very difficult to bring the portable unit up there and use that. So I think they did everything, I think, within their control. And also, in addition, the emissions are not, it's a small engine, so it's 89 horsepower, so the emissions are almost not very high, and this is a remote area, so there's no impact to the public from those emissions. So I think considering all that, I think we can make the finding.
Senator.
I concur. It was beyond your control, for sure, the failure. But your response to the failure to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the people in that area was essential. To the extent that you blended the water with the contaminated water because it becomes drinking water eventually. So it is essential. It is an issue that's to be discussed in Exhibit 6. Shows a lot of foresight, quick response time. In the case of a failure, to avoid the drinking water being contaminated, here's the action we should take. And that's the action you did take. However, the Commission on Government Procurement talk about critical contract items. Critical contract items that are necessary are items that were made in the United States of America. Texas Instrument, there are other companies you can buy checkerboards from. That's like buying nails and screwdrivers in this country. If you anticipate these problems in the future, look internally in the United States of America. You can find the best quick response time to correcting the problem.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Ms. Burra.
I have one more issue, and I'll actually, the governor had filed for a state of emergency, issued a state of emergency on February 21st, and it was due to storms beginning on February 12th. And so I was going to let the facility know that state of emergency had been issued. And under the fee rules for the hearing board, the board has discretion to waive fees under Rule 303P when there is a state of emergency. So I don't know if the facility would like to request that waiver.
I would like to request that waiver. I wasn't aware of that there was a state of emergency during that time.
We have no discretion, and we must waive. However, it needs to be the direct and proximate result of any event declared to be a state of emergency. Do you wish to give any kind of statement as to the direct and proximate result from the storm declared to be a state of emergency to what happened with the generator going over?
I don't have the proof that that is directly related, but in the past and seeing what we experience when we have storm events, it is commonly occurrence. When we have storm events, we have a lot of power fluctuations, but I don't have proof as to which incident at Edison resulted in what we were experiencing at our lift station.
But just that the initial on the tripping and the issue that you experienced occurred on February 14th, is that correct? And that was a power outage?
It did, yeah. We experienced a couple of power outages, and that was the result of it.
Ms. Bird, you had a question?
I was just wondering what the letter says that you have, that Ms. Barrera had given you to address what was going on. Does it mention any areas in specific areas, the county area of San Bernardino or any of those things?
So let me come back to my microphone. So it does, the emergency proclamation is issued for a number of counties, including the county of San Bernardino. It says, whereas beginning on January 5, 2019, an atmospheric river storm swept across California, bringing high winds, substantial precipitation, and flooding, significantly impacting counties throughout the state. Whereas atmospheric river systems continued to impact California throughout January and February 2019. And whereas beginning on February 12, 2019, another significant atmospheric river system swept across California, resulting in widespread damage. Whereas these winter storms caused extensive snowfall, high winds, dangerous flash flooding, erosion, widespread power outages, and mud and debris flow. And these winter storms caused damage to critical infrastructure, to roads and highways throughout the state. And then it goes on to issue the order. Unfortunately, I only have one copy of it. But based on the testimony that the facility, that there were power outages occurring, and it's the time frame is the same time frame addressed in the order. And that there was testimony about how they were experiencing other failures at in the Lake Arrowhead area due to weather and excess water and snow fall. It seems related.
I can accept that. I just wanted to, I kind of assumed that it was in that letter, but I didn't hear it, so I just wanted to make sure it was on the record. Thank you.
You had a question?
Related to the storm, I probably should have asked. So when the ATS system, due to the storm, the power failed, and then but then you had a failure on the engine side too, right? The ATS system didn't work in switching automatically over, but also you couldn't switch back to, when did Edison restore the power when it occurred on the 14th? Do you know?
It was restored, I think there was about a 20-minute interruption in power, and it was restored, but the transfer switch, without manually switching it, would not automatically transfer.
But could you have manually switch back to Edison power?
We would have to switch manually back.
And why did you choose not to do that?
Oh, we could have. I didn't trust Edison's power because we had seen several interruptions. And so knowing that the transfer switch wouldn't do it automatically in the middle of the night, I don't think we would have made it in time. And in fact, I'm confident we would have never made it in time to
Switch it back again manually, so you chose to run it. So it's storm-related, because then potentially there could have been more recurring Edison outage.
Yes, that is correct. And I'm glad I did, because there was a number of other
Other
power-
outages, okay, all right. So we can safely say that, or to make the finding on the fee waiver that, that the outage resulted in the engine, problems with the engine. The outage resulted in the generator running, but you had problems with the ATS system, and so that's why you couldn't switch back. But even if you had switched back, there's likelihood it would have failed again, and then somebody had to drive up there and manually do it again. And that's why you chose to keep it running.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we close the record on this? Okay, we're closing. Yes, go ahead, Senator.
When you have these circuit board failure, do you troubleshoot it?
Yes.
And then what are some of the discoveries as a result of the troubleshooting?
That's how we kind of worked our way into discovering the circuit board had an issue. We had to remove it, and then
How many components during that investigation that failed?
I'm sorry, I don't
How
understand.
many components? How many parts?
How many parts are in the automatic transfer switch?
That failed on the circuit board?
I would say there was at least one, if not two, components that had failed, and then we never took it apart even further to find out what caused any other damage. That's why I decided just to replace it, because I could no longer trust that it was going to operate properly when needed. We do have the parts, because we have similar automatic transfer switches, so we kept the old one so that we could utilize those parts if need be. If that answers your question.
Yes, to the extent that we shouldn't have to order and then have the delivery delivered by the ground rather than by the sky and get it quicker. That doesn't make sense to me what you did, but it was done anyway, to be very honest in my mind.
Well, we have probably 10 different automatic transfer switches. It's kind of difficult to have spare parts for every single component.
Every one of your circuit boards contain, for the most part, 90% components, parts that are similar. There's no other way you can explain it because that's what it does. And I don't have to look at it to know that.
Well, we have the ability to replace components on that circuit board, but we don't have the ability to repair any and all components of a circuit board if there was something fried.
Oh, you don't? You don't?
No.
What part can you not?
I'm sorry, what?
What part of the circuit board that you cannot repair?
If there's extensive damage and the circuit board is melted, we don't have the ability to make a new circuit board.
If it's melted, yes. You didn't say it was melted. You said you changed the parts.
In a previous situation, when it was less damage, we replaced the parts. I was referring to another lift station.
Okay, I'm going to close the record again now on the request to waive fees. And why don't we have that discussion, so that way we can have one single motion. Would anybody like to start that discussion on fees? Mr. Balagopalan?
Yeah, I think we can find reasons to waive the fee. I mean, it was declared by the governor as a state of emergency, and I think due to the power outage occurred due to the storm. And then of course, didn't help that they had problems with the ATS system. So I think as Mr. Carcabro testified, he didn't trust to switch it back to Edison Power, and rightfully so. He, like as you mentioned, that was the right thing he did and keep the running generator because they had several other failures. Had they switched back to Edison Power, and then was there another failure, then again there would have been spillage into the lake because they couldn't get personnel in time to manually do it. So I think they had no choice but to run the engine, and it was directly related to the power outage due to the storm. So I think we can tie it to that. Plus, I think they couldn't bring in the emergency generator because the storm had dropped a lot of snow on the ground, so they couldn't bring that either. So I think using those two conditions, situation, I think we can find grounds to waive the fee.
I'm gonna disagree on P, on 303P, but I might be able to make the finding under our discretionary powers, under M. And the reason why is I don't think it was, let me read P again. All fees associated with this rule shall be waived for any petition for a variance filed as the direct and proximate result of an event declared to be a state of emergency. It is true that the initial power interruption and the failure of the circuit board was a direct and proximate cause of the weather conditions that were declared to be a state of emergency by the governor. However, there was an intervening cause for why the 200 hours were exceeded and a variance is necessitated in this case, and that intervening cause was this shipping error, which caused the circuit board to come very late. But that was so not on a cause or anything that was related to anything that petitioner did. Petitioner asked for expedited, paid for expedited, would have had it the next day, and we don't know that the storms would have caused 200 hours to be exceeded. But it was that intervening factor, and I do believe that to impose fees, given that the original was due to something declared to be a state of emergency, And the continuing failure, which then put them into the need for the short variance, was something that was way beyond their reasonable control, and they tried to get around. It might be otherwise inequitable. So under that circumstance, I might be able to waive fees, but I don't believe it falls under P. Ms. Byrd?
It sounds like you have melded two things together, and for that reason as well, I get your argument, but I definitely think the fees should be waived.
Anyone else? Sorry, Senator, do you have thoughts?
I think they exceeded the time by 117 hours based on Exhibit 3, subtracting 929.5, and 812 from 2915 comes about 117 hours that you exceeded during that run period during the failure. So that's enough notice to taking some corrective action, I believe. However, it's going to be a small amount, so I'll go along with it. But be mindful of the fact, by the inaction on the part of your operation, this is what it's cost us in terms of pollution and time run.
That's true, and I think it's important that Mr. Kirkeborough had mentioned during his testimony that he understands that quicker action is necessary, and now we can note for the record, this is clearly, since it's -1, the first time Lake Arrowhead has been before us, and certainly Mr. Kirkeborough, given that you've only been there for 2 years, but timing is important. And there is always an opportunity then for the district to address an issue differently, perhaps, come up with conditions, et cetera. But I think you understand that moving forward. And fees wouldn't be assessed on the time before the variance, which is today, would take account today. So if there's no other discussion on anything, would anyone like to make a motion? Ms. Byrd, would you like to make a motion?
In the matter of Lake Arrowhead Community Services District, case number 6142-1, I move that we issue a short variance. And it is from the following conditions. It's from Rule 203B as it pertains to condition number 3, which is the 200-hour limit. And it is for the generator as noted on page 3 of the petition. Diesel generator application number F80829, located at 27361 North Bay Road, Lake Arrowhead, California, 92352. Excess emissions, even though they are not, we'll vote as to whether or not they will be paid. Fees will be paid, but the excess emissions are?
You would add that into your motion, so you make a decision and we'll vote on the motion.
Okay. Are we going to make 2 separate motions or one? At first, we said maybe one. Okay, excess emissions.
I think just add it to your motion.
Okay, are expected to be CO as 0.41 pounds per hour, NOx 0.44 pounds per hour, VOCs 0.39 pounds per hour, PM10 0.02 pounds per hour, and SOx 0.001 per hour. It will be with the conditions as listed in Exhibit A. And I'm going to include in my motion the waiver of the excess emissions fees. So that means that we will make the following changes to Exhibit A: to change the word regular to short, that's in the heading there, and to delete number 3 that says pay excess emission fees. There's already a log that will be kept, so there will be some understanding of what is taking place during that time, but we will waive the excess emissions fees.
And complete your motion.
That completes my motion.
I'm going to second the motion, and we need to put a time frame on it, and I did actually, during the hearing, calculate some dates, so let me help with that. The 90 days, I believe, expires August 22nd. So we would make it from today through August 22nd, or until a regular variance hearing can be held in this matter, whichever occurs first. And while we're at it, let's see if the parties are available. It would take approximately 45 days for the noticing to occur and for us to be able to get this on calendar, which leads us to approximately the week of July 9th through the 11th. And so I'll ask Ms. Barrera, Mr. Kirkaborough, if any one of those dates would work, and then we would put that in as a holding date.
I'm sorry, what were the July 9th to?
9th, 10th, or 11th. We have hearings on Tuesdays through Thursdays, and that is,
Any of those days work for me.
The 11th, I'm not good on the 11th, but the 9th or the 10th works.
okay. So why don't we set it for the 9th, July 9th? So then I would ask Ms. Byrd if she would amend the motion to begin today and on August 22nd, or until this matter can be held for a regular variance hearing currently scheduled for July 9th, whichever occurs first.
So amended.
Okay. And then, just to be clear, the emissions pounds per hour that you read into the record are only when
When it's operating.
when it's operating.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other discussion, Mr. Balagopalan?
Just one minor, and it's, it's the permit to operate as a R is in front of it as a reissue permit, so it's RF 80829, and it matches the permit, so.
So even though it says F, it's RF?
I'm sorry?
Even though it says F, it's RF 80829?
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's, yeah, add the R, yeah, sorry.
Okay,
Thank you for that.
thank you.
Right.
Yes,
that your motion?
Yes, let's put
Yes,
it
and
under
I'll
303.
second it under 303M. Any other thoughts, Senator?
Did the fee waiver included in the motion to grant? Well, on the fee waiver, let me just say that you operated this engine for 3 weeks at a savings that would have cost charged by Edison. It's cheaper to operate the equipment. And there is a savings there.
The fee waiver would not apply to past violations when they went
I
over,
understand
only
what it-
during the variance.
I understand what it applies up to this point, is what I'm saying. So it's just things that people do from time to time, I imagine. I'm not saying that you did, but it does happen. Just worth noting, it is worth noting. And so I have noted it. However, we go forward henceforth.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or discussion
I
on the
just wanted
motion?
to make one comment about the information earlier, that there were no discharges, blended or otherwise, as a result of this engine running specifically to, that we're discussing today.
You mean water discharges?
Water discharges, I'm sorry. Couldn't let that go.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion before us? Okay, seeing none. Senator, how do you vote? Mr. Balagopalan, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Yes.
And Ms. Byrd votes yes. Motion passes 4-0. And just because I think it's a very, you're a very busy person, and it's a very straightforward issue, since we've just had this hearing, you might want to just consider looking at our rules on consent calendar for the regular variance.
That was going to be my question. Assuming there are no changes in facts between now and the July hearing, would the board be open to hearing this matter on consent?
I think it's a perfect matter to be on consent. I can't speak for all board members, but as you say, the 200 hours were already exceeded. We've already discussed that, and so moving forward, there should be, unless something changes, it would be a perfect matter for consent.
Okay, thank you.
I just had one other comment as well. I think you did an excellent job in preparing the data for today, for your first time.
Thank you.
I agree, thank you. Any other business, board members? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.